This morning we're going to do little ABCs. The Alliance for a Better Community. And what they are is a nonprofit organization established in the year 2000 by a coalition of Latino leaders who share a common vision to establish a mechanism that would shape Latino policy in Los Angeles by promoting equity in education, health, economic development, and civic participation. And I want to say good morning to our guests, and hopefully I got to get your name right. Unai Montes-Irueste? Help me out here.
Yeah, Unai Montes-Irueste. Good morning.
Okay.
Thank you for having us.
I'll get it, but not with the accent, I'm sure. Yeah, okay. And Ofelia, Medina?
Perfect.
Oh, there we go. So welcome, and thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. And Unai, you've been a former educator and champion of education reforms. And you've worked with community organizations. What got you involved with the Alliance for a Better Community?
I think probably the shortest version of that is the executive director, the new executive director, Angelica Solis, and I had a conversation about the kinds of things that would be needed to move the ball forward. And I spent the last several years working on campaigns, and one of the things that we thought we needed to do was marry some of those best practices from the campaign world with the policy advocacy world in education.
And Ofelia, what about yourself? What got you involved?
The same thing, especially around early care and education. I've always been a strong advocate for quality services and programs for children under the age of 5. And ABC is definitely an organization that looks at the holistic child, so addressing their needs from prenatal to birth all the way to college and career.
Now, is there a real need for this organization? I mean, you know, Los Angeles is mostly Latino. Hell, we have a Latino mayor. I mean, members of the city council. Seems like there's a fair shake going on right now.
Unfortunately, that would be like saying that because we have a black president, we no longer need to worry about the racial achievement gap. We do have a district that is 74% Latino, but we have an incredible gap between the students that are from poverty backgrounds, who are English language learners, and the ones that are, from the affluent parts of Los Angeles. And all of them belong to the same school district, but they're not all having the same educational experience. They're not all given the same opportunities, and they do not see the same outcomes.
Okay, well, I buy that, but isn't that same thing happening in other ethnic areas too? Isn't this a global thing? It's not. I would think it's not just the Latino issue.
No, certainly not. We definitely work in coalition with other organizations that focus on what are called subpopulations or populations of need. So it's not. The fact that we were founded by persons concerned about the Latino community does not mean that we turn our back or shun the rest of Los Angeles or any other community. We work in coalition, and we try to improve the schools for all children. We believe that all children deserve the best possible education.
Trying to improve the schools, that's jumping a giant hurdle in Los Angeles these days, because if you look at the schools, it just seems like the education level and the amount of choices offered and the amount of things going on at the schools has rapidly decreased over the years. How do you go about turning that around?
The very succinct answer is, as Ofelia said, we try to start at the beginning and end at the end. We have a tremendous problem in terms of early education, which I hope Ofelia will tell us a little bit more about, and the challenges that are there, because we know that getting children off on the right foot means that they are reaching those levels of proficiency, reading a grade level and achieving, and then moving beyond that. On the other end, we know that we have a dropout crisis, and we need to reverse that dropout crisis. But at the same time, we need to make high school education much more rigorous and much more relevant, because those kids that are going on to college mostly need remediation, and we need to remove that problem.
Right, and those kids that are going on to college are only leaving high school at maybe a junior high school level in some of these cases. Seems like people be passed on to grades even though they didn't achieve that level to go to the next grade.
Absolutely. We have a tremendous problem with social promotion, but I think we also have a problem that historically comes from not having a good set of standards. I mean, you'd be surprised. When No Child Left Behind was established, for instance, there was this idea that all the states would define, a standard of proficiency, and then they would move to get 100% of their students to that level by 2014. As the years went by and they saw how difficult that challenge was, many states, for lack of a better word, cheated, and they moved the line of proficiency down. So they really dumbed down the test and dumbed down the expectations. And so it wasn't just a question of like, well, this kid is old enough, let's move him up to the next grade. It was a question of the standards being too low for what was needed for a college and career.
That's insanity. I mean, how do you grow the country when you can't grow our children? When you're, graduating 12th graders that have the ability to read at a 7th grade level. I mean, come on. You talk about what it takes to grow an economy and why we're having issues. All these other nations are getting in front of us with education.
Of course. And as I said, we've definitely seen, while the landscape is very challenging, especially you alluded to earlier, the funding crisis and the fact that 80% of LAUSD's money, for instance, does come from the state. And as the state loses revenue, LAUSD loses revenue. Over the last 3 years, that's meant $800 per child of lost state revenue. So they have to do more with less. And the new superintendent has sort of made that particular phrase one of his taglines. But I'd like to actually, as I said, begin at the beginning and really have Ofelia talk about how we begin to establish these high expectations and high standards in early education, because really starting there makes the rest of our job much easier.
Right. And I think that's one of the challenges, that because funding for the last couple of years has decreased, and not only within the K through 12 education, but even in the early care and education, that makes it a bit much harder for us to do our work in terms of really trying to narrow the gap between the Latino community and the rest of the community in terms of education. In early care and education, we already know how important it is for children to really receive the supports and the programs needed to really address their linguistic and developmental needs, for example. Right. And the correlation between how those are addressed at the early age and how they can actually improve on their academic skills.
I think one of the challenges your organization has, and any Latino organization has, is people don't speak English. And, you get through school, and if you can't speak English, you're screwed in this world, because this is the United States, and actually the entire world is an English-speaking world. All of air traffic control is English. Banking is English. If you don't learn English in this world, you really are at a super big disadvantage.
Correct, and that's one of the issues that we try to address at ABC. I mean, the fact that just in LAUSD, 43% of kindergartens go into LAUSD as an English learner, and years after, they're still classified as English learners. It's a huge...
That's rough.
It's a huge... Exactly.
That's really, really rough.
Right.
Especially when you start to get into the higher grades and you still don't have it down.
So then at the early age, what we try to do is make sure that teachers are prepared to address the needs of Latino children, and that parents also are aware that they, as parents, need to really focus on language development, both at the Spanish level, but also at the English level as well.
You put your finger on what I think is one of the issues. Education can't stop in the school. It has to be in the home and in the school.
Definitely. And one of the things that we're seeing is at the early age, parents are really involved in the education of their children, not extremely involved to the point that we want them to be, but they are involved. But then somehow once they make it into elementary, middle school, and high school, unfortunately, they're not as involved, and that's due to a number of reasons.
Yeah, it's not the days of Ozzie and Harriet anymore, where mom and dad are home, and Ricky and Davy come home, and then they work with the kids. Lots of times now, that's latchkey homes, both parents, if there are both parents, working and not getting home until late. So, the world has changed, and unfortunately, the kids have taken the shorts in this case.
Sure. I mean, I don't want to create a false sense of nostalgia of this perfect time of Wally and the Beav in America. I think that the fact is that we had our major sort of starting point for making education what it needs to be is Brown versus the Board of Education, which comes from that era. And so we know that these challenges with education are long-standing challenges, and they're related to other challenges in public policy as well. One of the things that chases parents away from being involved in their children's education is the fact that they don't have a background in American schools. So you do point to the fact that we have a large Asian and Latino immigrant population, and those school systems are very different. From our Asian partners, we've learned tremendously that, parents don't understand that all of these exams that people need to take in order to get into college, they're not administered by the schools themselves. They're administered by separate consulting services, and that's a separate fee on a separate facility. It's a very different process to follow. Again, just simply knowing how the college system works in this country, what the expectations are to graduate with a high school diploma, how you need to be prepared. These are pieces of information that parents are being denied. And when parents do choose to be involved, unfortunately, the cases that we've seen are the parents that are moving their children around to try to get them into different school districts that then end up getting punished for lying about where they live. Or in the situation that just happened in Compton, a series of parents who signed, and activated the parent trigger law, a state law that was created for No Child Left Behind. That group of parents had their signatures challenged. They were told, you know what, prove to me that you signed this, prove to me that you understood what this was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So even when parents do choose to get involved, a lot of times there are still problems within the system itself that push parents back out.
We're talking about the Alliance for a Better Community right here at 106.7 K-Rock. 1-800-520-1067. That would be our phone number. And this would be Darren from Wilmington. Hey, Darren.
Hey, how you doing, Scott? Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for calling.
You know, you have good morning, both of you. I couldn't pronounce the names either, but good morning. And you know what? Good on you for doing what you do for the children. It's I find that pretty important, obviously, because there's a foundation of our community, which happens to be Los Angeles, not the other part of the country. That's I'm really more concerned about where we live. And you made some good statements. I listen to the radio program every morning I can, and I find that your knowledge, Scott, and that your abilities to get deeply involved in this in these subjects really helps out people like myself who listen. Anyway, to get to the point, you talked about 70-some% of the children in our community are Latino or from another other than white, I guess you would say. And you're talking about monies that are coming from the state. Well, our state's bankrupt. How do we fundamentally fund these programs when we have a bankrupt state, a bankrupt city, run by people who are digging into their pocketbooks, putting money into their pocketbooks, and not concerned about your programs? They're not concerned about programs anymore, or city functions like fire departments, police departments. As you know, the fire department's shutting down stations. I don't agree with that. How are we supposed to fund the education for our future when you don't have a tax basis? People aren't paying their taxes. You can, any day of the week, today, in fact, go downtown and look and count how many taxpayers we have. That's where our money comes from, and they need to start paying taxes. So somehow our community leaders need to figure out how to achieve receiving funds from people who want to educate their children.
Well, more money in equals more money out. That's the easy one. How do you get the more money in? You ask a complicated. A question requires a complex answer because it truly is a complicated question.
You heard recently, not to change off the subject, because I know we like to talk about the subject, but this is an open line. How do we fund? I know you heard about the fire stations shutting down. They agreed to shut down fire stations. Your tax base is not only funds the children, but it funds your public service.
Sure.
And how do we allow that? I'd like to know how we allow the largest city in the nation, one of them, to close fire stations and uneducated.
Well, unfortunately, that topic I could do a whole show on that particular topic because that's a big one, and it's real, and it affects many citizens of the city of Los Angeles.